меня был шанс посмотреть большинство презентаций. Хочу сказать, что часть из них, ну большинство, да, очень были для меня интересны. И я бы назвал сегодняшний день в нашей комнате как секреты. Секреты выхода на рынок, секреты разработки, секреты успешного ведения бизнеса. И особый фокус сегодняшнего дня на различные платформы, на кросс-промоушен среди платформ, на выход среди различных платформ одновременно, да. И вот Neal Sinno, который сейчас как раз будет презентовать доклад, расскажет о том, как о таком понятии, как syndication, или по-русски это выход сразу на несколько платформ. Пару слов о Ниле, да, Нил эксперт является Casual Connect, то есть очень известная и уважаемая личность, да, для тех, кто его не знает. При этом в данный момент он является VP по бизнес-девелопменту нескольких компаний, но при этом Нил начинал как лидер веб-команд, участвовал в разработке и в продакт-менеджменте, то есть понимает весь рынок с самого, скажем так, зачатия до бизнес-девелопмента. Но хочу представить Нила с его презентацией Syndication the King.
Thank you very much. Not sure what you said, but I'm sure it was nice. So good morning, everyone. I appreciate everyone coming in. What I wanted to use today's presentation for was to kind of give an overall strategy of how you can monetize your games in a lot of different paths. A lot of people develop one way with maybe a downloadable game or just a web game or a social game. What I'm going to explore a little bit is how we found success developing from starting with a web game and then moving on into other different manners after we've proven business models. So, a little overview on our business. My name is Neal Sinno. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Arkadium. We're a 10-year-old company with about 125 employees. We're based in New York City with offices in Ukraine, Los Angeles, and now Toronto. What we've been doing over the past 10 years is really built a library of about 300 Flash games. I'll admit some games are better than others, but that's kind of part of the process. You put out a lot of games and try to understand a little bit about which games are successful and which games are not. We own all of our own IP. We develop every one of our games in our studios in New York and Ukraine. And we've done all of this without any financing behind us. So we're not venture capitalist backed. We're what they call bootstrapped. We've kind of been building it over the years, which obviously leads to some of the complexity of business, but it's something we're pretty proud of, being able to build our business over time. Last month we served 154 million gameplays. So we have a lot of large partners that have been leveraging our games and getting lots of good use out of it, and I'm going to show you some of those examples today. Obviously, most of you don't need me to tell you that the game industry is a pretty great business. We're all learning a lot. The industry is growing, and we see more and more every year. And I think, you know, a few years ago, we'd sit up here and we'd talk about downloadable games and downloadable game growth, and that's still growing, and it's still an awesome market. We work with a lot of people in a lot of different groups. That's great. We see a lot of growth in social games. We see a lot of growth in Flash games still, and we've seen a lot of growth in mobile games. And so as that industry is growing, what we've been doing as a business is really just kind of exploring all those different avenues and seeing which one works best and, you know, focusing our efforts that way. Some of the basics that I wanted to kind of go into as we got into, this is complicated here. Syndication is starting out with, there we go. All right, I think I got it going now. How we got started and how we started exploring the model. And as I mentioned earlier, we built a whole lot of games in-house. So over the last 10 years, we've been building Flash games, 300 of them, starting little by little, developing games that we know works. Solitaire games, Mahjong games, hidden object games, match 3 games, all the different kinds of proven mechanics that we know will perform well. and we try presenting them in a lot of different ways. What we wanted to do is kind of test the market and grow our business slowly without having to take financing behind it. So our strategy was, and it took a long time to do it, but it was a good strategy in the end, is build the games, test the market. So syndicate those games, put them out to different portals, earn revenue on those games, and then reinvest that money back into building more games. So if you kind of follow that process, you're really taking a look at, okay, which games are performing well. So if I put my games out on multiple places and I see that one game is a clear winner, then that's where I can focus my efforts over time. So when you're developing a Flash game, obviously the cost of development is a lot smaller. So you can spend, $5,000, $10,000 developing a Flash game, and then internal resource costs, and then do that multiple times over. You start to see that you put a minimal investment into your Flash game development. If you can license those games out to people, you can then reinvest into the winner. And so that's what we were doing. We were trying to find the most successful game out of our library. And our winner happened to be a game called Mahjong Dimensions. I wouldn't have thought this would have been the winner. It wasn't my guess of which one was going to be the winner, but it was the one that was the most successful for us. This is a 3D Mahjong puzzle game. We developed this initially for a $5,000 development cost. We spent $5,000 of internal time, internal development to make this game. So once we found that this one was the winner, we wanted to make sure that we monetized this experience. How was it the winner, though, is the question. Well, when we licensed this game out to multiple portals, it was always the top performing game. So if I put this game out on MSN, or if I put it out with my friends at Wild Tangent, or I put it out on Pogo, or wherever we ended up distributing it to, this game always rose to the top. It was the cream of the crop. So once we realized that this was the game, and it's a Flash version, we started to want to explore different business models to see if we could continue that same success outside of the Flash game market. So what did we do? These are some examples of what we did in order to kind of get the brand recognized. One, we put it on some large brands in the US to start. We're US based, made sense. We went to some partners based in New York, like Lifetime Television, which is a large female-focused demographic women's network, and game rose to the top. The game was running awesome. Top performer out of every game that they had on their site, was making lots of money for the client. They were really happy. They started saying nice things about it, and other people became interested. Some of the things that we also did was we allowed everyone to rebrand the game. So if they had a sponsor that was interested in putting their logos on the game, we helped facilitate a new piece of artwork to kind of go on the top. Some of those examples you can see down below. We have a back-to-school version of Mahjong Dimensions. We have a Halloween version of Mahjong Dimensions. If an advertiser came in like Coca-Cola, we would have a Coca-Cola version of Mahjong Dimensions. What this really does is really helps our partners monetize really well. They make a lot more money if they have a sponsorship added to the game. In turn, they're more happy, and they come back for us for more product, which we then can reinvest back into developing more games. So our strategy was starting to work. We started to see our clients making more money. In turn, we were making more money. So we're like, all right, now it sounds like a good time. Social was coming out. And so we moved forward. We developed a social game. We developed this social game in-house. We took what we knew about the game. We knew what demographic played. We knew how popular it was. We knew what mechanics people liked from licensing the game out. And we continued to put some of those components into a newer version called Mahjong Dimensions, and more recently called Mahjong Dimensions Blast. What did we add into this version? Microtransactions. Microtransactions are the big component here. This is our chance to monetize even more. We also added advertising. Advertising is a great component in order to monetize your game experience even better. Between advertising and microtransactions, we quickly found that we recouped our development costs within 30 days of putting the game out onto Facebook. So we made an initial investment of $50,000 to develop this game for Facebook, and we recouped that cost within 30 days. The audience grew very quickly. We reached close to 1 million people within that first 30 days of putting the game out on Facebook. Why? Because they were familiar with the game. That's part of it. The game had been seen on a lot of different portals. We introduced it again, and we targeted our advertising spend to the same audience we knew liked it in the first place. That proved to be very successful. Quite honestly, it was a lucky guess. So we kind of tested our way through it and to see what would happen. One of the things that we found out that was awesome about doing the social game is that the audience will tell you what they want in the game. So if you look on the message boards around the game, they were like, I would love to have more time. Wouldn't it be great if I had more time in the game? So we developed a microtransaction component that gave them more time in the game. They were like, I really want to be able to customize my background. Well, I gave you a microtransaction element in order to pay to customize your background. So anything that the audience asked for, you started to see that they were asking for pretty much the same things. We would develop a way for them to do it in the game. So very easily. If they didn't like the advertisings in the game, we offered them the ability to turn off ads by paying for it. So you quickly raise your revenue stream very quickly, and you start to understand that your audience is going to tell you what direction you want the game to go. They want the game to go in. You really just have to listen. And so that's where our analytics and our kind of community management came into play. By listening and watching and how the game was performing, how was the first user experience in the game? Did the users like to play the game, and were they coming back? If they weren't coming back, why weren't they coming back? We really wanted to understand all the different components, but it really wasn't reinventing the wheel. We kept most of the game the same. We just gave them the opportunity to kind of tweak and customize their experience a little bit. This game has been out for about 2 years and still continues to perform for us. We're currently sitting just below 1 million MAUs for the game. It still monetizes very well and takes very little development support in order to keep the game fresh. So this is kind of our market leader in the game at this point. What was really, really great about this opportunity, putting the game out on social, is we'd actually never thought about doing anything else beyond that. But what happened is that the audience started telling us, again, we're listening to them, they're telling us more and more and more. They're like, I want to be able to play this when I'm offline. And we typically were not a download development company, but we thought, wow, maybe it's time to make a download for it. So we developed a download, again, made a little strategic investment from the earnings that we had from the social game, developed the download, and then promoted it right here on Facebook. What's the good part about promoting a download on Facebook? You don't have to pay a revenue share to Facebook. So you pay your DRM revenue share fee for your digital rights management around the game. But at this time, it was a really great way to sell the game. They're already addicted to the game. They're already playing the game. They're already coming back every day to play the game. And now you're offering them another product they can play when they're away from Facebook. So we saw our sales jump. We saw them jump so much that we started to think, well, maybe we should start to look beyond Facebook and distribute it. And so we went to our partners again with Real Networks. We went to our partners at Wild Tangent, and their numbers were great. So not only do they have a web version of the game, they have a downloadable version of the game, and those can help sell each other for themselves too. You guys probably all know that part. But between the revenue model we were generating on Facebook and the revenue through our partners, we started to see that there was a lot more that we could do with this game, and we started to decide we wanted to syndicate it further. Here's an example of our most recent version of the download. Not only did we do one, we ended up doing another because it sold so well. This one's called Tiles in Time. We just recently released this 2 weeks ago, and it actually has been monetizing better than the original version. We've seen a lot of value on that download side, but the mobile side also proved to be pretty valuable for us. From a mobile side, we spent very little on our development. We developed it in-house, again, just for the iOS platform. We didn't even make an iPad version for it specifically. We just kept it really as a standard iPhone version. Turned out that it was a top 50 selling iPad version anyway, even though it wasn't optimized for iPad. So some things you learn through the process, and some things you learn by trying to make the best effort. I would say that our newest version that's coming out would be an iPad version, because we realized that people prefer to play it on the iPad after putting it out. This sold really well. Also worked really well because we could promote it again off our social game. And we could promote it again through our other channels that we were distributing the game. One of the other ways that few people have tried and not everyone has done great at is skill games. We partnered with World Winner. They were a great partner for us, and we gave them Mahjong Dimensions from a skill standpoint. It's actually a great revenue stream, and a lot of people, if you have the opportunity to take part in it, I would suggest trying it. You don't have to really do much. So essentially, when you're going into a skill platform, you're actually just delivering the source code of your game to the partner. So in this case, we give our game to World Winner. World Winner puts it up, they promote it, they monetize, and they create new streams of distribution. They create a survival tournament mode for the game. They create a progressive rush version of the game, because they're in turn, like in their own internal environment, they're listening to what their users want and developing new gameplay and techniques in order to monetize it the most. These are great long tail revenue streams. Again, we delivered this game a little over a year and a half ago, and we're still monetizing the experience over and over and over again. One of the newest syndication methods that we did that's proven to be very successful for us is taking our social games and syndicating them as well. So again, this is taking the game that we built specifically for Facebook and bringing it to other portals. We started off by doing this to Lifetime Television, the brand I mentioned earlier. Since we knew the web game performed well, and we knew they were selling a lot of the download versions through Lifetime Television, we decided to add the social version directly onto the page. Users log in via their Facebook Connect login, and they're able to play the social version as if they were on Facebook themselves. Simply done through an iframe, very easy implementation, and allows the users to experience the game where they choose to do it. So if the user is already dedicated to being on Lifetime's webpage, well, let's give them the opportunity to play the social games in the same place. We've recently added it, in this example, to the Pogo game experience. Are you guys all familiar with Pogo? They have a lot of audience. They have quite a bit of audience. They've done a really great job of monetizing that audience. And in this case, we took it a little bit differently. We provided them the source code of our game and let them implement the game based on what they knew about their audience. Now, I could integrate in and I could create a game on their website, but Pogo knows their audience very well. They know exactly what kind of microtransactions they like to purchase. They know exactly how they like to see ads. They know exactly how the user wants to experience the game. So I'll give them the opportunity to do it. So with no development effort on my part, I gave them the source code to my social game, and they integrated it onto Pogo. Currently, right now, it averages between 750 and 1,000 concurrent players at any given time. The business model is an advertising revenue share. The business model is also a microtransaction revenue share. And so between those two revenue share components and very, very little effort on my side, we have another opportunity and another strong revenue stream. These have proven to be the most successful from a revenue stream for us because it takes the least amount of development effort and still offers you a great return on your investment. So that initial investment that we made in making a social game 2 years ago is still paying back to us dividends in an annuity in a way that we never even had expected. So you have a web game, you have a downloadable game, you have a mobile game, and you have the social game, and all of that development investment was under $100,000 of total development. So from our side, those are soft costs, because those are costs that we did internally with our own resources, and instead we've now found almost five different revenue streams to monetize from. The same process doesn't have to happen just with Mahjong Dimensions. So at the same time that we're doing this with that one game title, we're also exploring this with a lot of different game titles. So we've explored new games and put them on other providers like Bing or Microsoft Games. Those have been a great forum for us to understand a lot about our audience. Believe it or not, little old Arkadium, my small little company here, we're one of the top game providers on MSN. MSN has great traffic, they have a great audience, and it's an opportunity to share revenue based on advertising with that audience. So our games are actually the top performing games on MSN, and we've been trying and exploring developing new games and adding it to their audience. Once we understand which games are more successful, then we'll begin to repeat that entire process again that we did with Mahjong Dimensions. Develop a mobile game, develop a social game, develop a downloadable game, trying all the different options again to further monetize our initial development efforts. One of the ways that we continued to understand the games was syndicating through Europe. A lot of American companies, I think, have been slow with reaching out in reverse to Europe. I think a lot of American companies see the European companies reaching out for America, but there's such a huge revenue opportunity in Europe that I think most developers aren't taking part of themselves. And again, I'm speaking about American developers reaching out to Europe. Spiel was one of our first partners in Europe. Is everyone familiar with Spiel games? Yeah. So they did a really great job of taking, again, our Mahjong Dimensions, and they were one of the early rebranding companies. So they had rebranded our game in order to better suit their needs. What we did with this game over time, in order to allow people to rebrand them more effectively, is we externalized all the art assets in the game so that it was really easy to rebrand. So via XML, the partner could go in, put in new images, and have a brand new, fresh game. So if it's Christmas time, you have your Christmas version. If it's springtime, you can have your spring version. And really, all you have to do is make tile pieces and change a background if you wanted to. So you have a seasonal, fresh game that still performs and really just keeps returning on its investment. Xylem, from the download side, we had initially put out our download only in English, and Xylem took the liberty of doing all the translations for us. A great partner. They were like really effective at kind of getting in there and making sure that we had localized versions of our download. That really helped the sales of our download much more than I'd even expected. We learned, localization seems like it's obvious, but really kind of taking part and going to Xylem and having them do that was a very helpful piece for us. We saw a great amount of return on that. So I borrow from Dave Nixon here. I saw one of his Facebook posts. I don't know if you guys heard Dave speaking before, but it's one of the things we learned through this process is that when you look at success, you're expecting that, we call it the hockey stick. You want to see it all go straight up, and you want to see it happen right away. I don't know how this translates, but sometimes success doesn't go that way. It takes a whole bunch of circles. In the US, we call it squirrely. It kind of goes around a lot of different directions. Sometimes going in those different directions allows you to learn a little bit in the process. And you don't have to knock it out of the park in your first shot. You don't have to be a screaming success. If you look at developers like that do Angry Birds or anything else, they've had a lot of failures along the way. And sometimes it's those failures that actually help you be more successful when it's time for you to be successful. We didn't do it in a day. We started becoming more successful over time as we started making sure that we weren't making the same mistakes again and again. But once you understand more about your audience, and if you look at the details of what your games are doing and who likes your games, you'll start to get that success metric. But it took a whole lot of circles around and not really kind of making any money for a while in order to drive that success in the business. So we're pretty excited by it that, eventually we did go in that upward mode, and it took some time in order to do it. But I think from our standpoint it was kind of the journey in the process that made it more exciting for us, is actually just learning what we thought we knew wasn't always correct, and the things that you thought were wrong actually turn out to be correct, and ride that process, and it's usually, a fun ride along the way. So that was my song and dance. You guys have any questions about what we did or any feedback?
Can you provide the publisher, the partners, your game code? How is the game leaderboard and the film? Is that their platform, or do they have to do their own?
So that really depends. So the question was, when we provide the developer our games, how do we integrate into like the leaderboards, and how do we do all that work? So typically, we're not always providing the source code to the game. What we do is a couple of different things. One, we provide leaderboards ourselves. We have a game platform to help facilitate that piece. If someone else has their own game platform, we either can help integrate it into their platform, or we give them source code to a game end screen where they can then integrate. So the game communicates with the game end screen, the game end screen communicates with their leaderboard. So some of our larger partners like IAC in the US, They do all that work themselves, and some of our other partners will help integrate it in for them. So typically we're not, like for a Flash game, we're not delivering the FLA, it's just the SWIFT.
Why are you not going for Android?
That's a good question. It's funny, one of my friends over at Wild Tangent's been asking me the same thing. They have a great model, and I think it is a good model. I think we saw, based on our type of business, and again, it all kind of goes back to that no VC-backed piece. You start to look at things a little bit differently and where you can get immediate rewards for certain items and others not. And I think Android started out slow from the monetization standpoint, so we invested in the iOS side first. But I would say that that's not the case anymore. I would say from our perspective, we're looking at everything from the mobile side. So not just iOS, but also taking a look at Android and even Windows 8, their new mobile platform, is something that we're certainly exploring. So I had mentioned earlier, we opened up an office in Toronto. Our office is focused primarily on that. So iOS, Android, and Windows 8 is really where we're exploring. I'll lay it back. Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a potential problem. So with Mahjong Dimensions, we didn't notice it a lot in the beginning because, you have the same game playing in different platforms. Some users are like, well, how come my score didn't carry over, or they wanted their score to go into different places? It's actually one of the things that I'm trying to address now. And working with download providers, not everyone's into this yet, but, carrying some of that information or your experience from that web version to the online version, and then seeing if other portals are interested in carrying that across. A lot of portals that we work with want to just keep their scores solid with their portal, and others are willing to share. So yeah, I mean, I think a small percent of the user base gets upset by that, not being able to, but for the most part, I think you can pretty much get away with it. No, in this case, I preferred the kind of long-tail revenue stream. So I didn't ask for a lump sum. I just go for an ongoing revenue share. The reason why I do that is a couple different reasons. It helps me build my business better. So if I know every month I have a set amount of money coming in, I know how to build over time. So I know that I can pay payroll. I know that I can pay rent. I know that I can continue to build because I know what my incoming revenue is and what my fixed costs are. So a lot of these I do that way on purpose in order to, again, keep track of that incoming revenue. Yeah, so that's a good question, and I was actually waiting for someone to ask that. We have a lot of those are licensed on a monthly basis. So we actually license annual contracts for all of our games. I would say a subset of the 300, maybe about 100 of them, are actively licensed at any given times. Some are more popular than others. Some could be considered fill, like people are just looking for games. Some of them are licensed to agencies and rebranded for other projects. But about 100 of the 300 are probably used on a regular basis. And the others, every once in a while, they get licensed. I'm sorry? Yeah, I mean, this is the primary one that we're using under the Arkadium brand, and it's very important. By the nature of our business, we do a lot of other client work. So it may not have my brand on it, but it might be the developer behind it. But this one we keep my brand on because it's like our bejeweled, so to speak. Any other questions?
Еще вопросы? Neal,
Cool.
I have one question. So,
Sure.
For young developers, of course, they don't have 300 games, right?
Sure.
So, what could you recommend to develop as much games as you can and then measure, for example, 20 games, or continue working on improvement of 5 games? games and improve every day and to see reaction of community and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, if I, looking back now over the last few years, so I've been in games for about 8 years, and so over that time, seen a lot of different things, but it seems like a lot of partners are looking for about 20 games. People that are looking to license games are looking for about 20. So if you took 20 of the most proven mechanics out there and develop as many as 20, but even a subset of 10 games, I think it's an opportunity to, be successful that way. I found that, our most commonly licensed games are still Solitaire, Mahjong, Hidden Object. The games that you would expect have been around for a long period of time are still the most licensed games in our catalog. The interesting thing we always see about those games, and it's a good story to tell potential partners, is if you have a Mahjong game up on a portal and there's 10,000 people playing that game per day, and you add a second Mahjong game up, you have 10,000 people playing the first game and 10,000 people playing the second game. And so it doesn't hurt to have different versions of that same type of game. If we know Mahjong works, it's okay to still make Mahjong games. It's not sexy. I mean, it's not something that gets everybody excited, but it certainly works. And there's a lot of different businesses out there that are looking for the Mahjong games, the puzzle games, the solitaire games. And if you keep it basic, you will actually find business models in that. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Neil.